Hey, everyone. Welcome back to SOFcast. I want to welcome to our show Major David Carr and Lauren Carr. I'm super excited to be able to talk to you guys. Welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that you hear us talk about in special operations a lot is taking care of our people, whether it's leadership talking about it at the lowest levels, at the highest levels. And obviously, if you've listened to the show, it's one of the things that we focus on the most. And taking care of our people takes a lot of, there's a lot of different levels to that. But one of the most important ones is to provide a safety net for anyone that's wounded, ill, or injured and make sure that we have their back. And you guys have a very, very important story to share about your own personal journey. I want to start back from that just slightly and kind of get us into the portion where you get into special forces. So I know you guys met in the Q course. Talk me through a little bit, David, kind of joining, why you wanted to become a Green Beret, all those things, and kind of get us to the point where you and Lauren get together.
I think the where I would start that cognitively is that I did not go into the Army dead set on I'm going to go, be a Green Beret. Really want to get into Special Forces. It's not something that it's not a thought I had in my mind the day I commissioned. It wasn't necessarily intentional. I just, it got to the point where I got the emails that, hey, this is your opportunity. And I've said for a long time that job interviews of all kinds go two ways. So I very much went to selection with the open mind and without a strong decision that that I was confident that that's what I wanted to do. But going in, the experience that I had at selection definitely solidified that decision for me, that I really enjoyed the atmosphere and the kind of people that I found myself around and knew that I wanted to spend more time within that community.
Yeah, absolutely. Lauren, there pretty quickly after selection in the Special Forces qualification course, you guys meet up. Talk me through kind of coming into the SOF world from the spouse perspective.
Yeah. So Dave and I met at the gym. We are morning workout people, so we were at the 5:30 a.m. 5:30 a.m. class. So just struck up conversation. Went on our first date to Chipotle, and that kind of solidified solidified our relationship and kicked us off. I actually have worked as a government contractor surrounding the special operations community for the last 14 years. But coming into it from a spouse perspective is certainly an entirely different adventure when your loved one is going overseas and deploying, and frequently it's a bit different than providing support to the force. So
yeah. As much as I would like to, I definitely don't get credit for bringing Lauren into special operations community. She was there long before I was.
Tell me, at least sprung for like guacamole on the Chipotle date. At least got the upcharge. At least or double meat or something.
Always guacamole.
All right, fair enough. Well, as you then move to 10th Special Forces Group, talk me through kind of as a couple now. We're in the Special Forces community together, all of those things, and then kind of lead us up to ultimately the diagnosis that really changed everything, right?
So that was a bit of a tall order on my side, asking Lauren. So we got married kind of on the way out to Colorado. So in the midst of COVID, I asked her to essentially move across the country and restart a lot of things out west. And by the way, you can't go out and make friends like you normally would, and you have to work from home and you're stuck in the house a lot of the time. So that was definitely a challenge.
The perfect proposal, right, Lauren?
It was, yeah. Yes, and our wedding was just the two of us.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, as you get into team life and all of that, ultimately you get that shocking news that no one expects. All of a sudden, brain cancer, right? That is, not part of the Q course is expecting that, right? So talk me through sort of the lead up to that and the ultimate diagnosis, and then we'll get into the story of all that.
So by the time we got that news, we actually moved back to North Carolina from Colorado. We were already back here. I came back to North Carolina to participate in a grad school program through NDU that's hosted here at Fort Bragg. And I was about a month out from graduating that program when we eventually got the news. And fortunately, my brain tumor was not cancerous. It was just a inconvenient mass of skin cells that were growing in absolutely the wrong place.
Inconvenient indeed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we had noticed when we were in Colorado, we had noticed that Dave had started, losing his balance. He would have episodes where he would kind of seize up and he wouldn't be able to talk. He expressed kind of concerns with driving because he was experiencing double vision. And it started, right before we left Colorado, and with each episode, it got progressively worse. And, we kind of assumed like, hey, we're not in our 20s anymore. We can't just, go out and crush it and do a hard workout, because most of the time his episodes were on the heels of a really hard workout. But the last episode that finally sent us to the emergency room, he hadn't worked out in a couple of days because he hadn't been feeling well, which, we found out was because of the tumor. Sure. And so he collapsed at a family friend's retirement party and hit his head on a door on his way down. And so as we, turned him over and was trying to help him up, he was trying to talk to me and he was slurring his words. And I was like, it's time. It's time. So when we did the MRI, they told us like it was an epidermoid tumor, which, like Dave said, is a mass of skin cells that had been there for a really long time, and it had grown to the point to where it was pressing against his brain, which is why he became symptomatic. And so from flash to bang, it was 3 weeks from diagnosis to this has to come out. And when they told us that, Dave looked at me when it was just the two of us at the emergency room and said, when aggressive is your only option, I guess aggressive it is. Because if it continued to grow, it would eventually kill him. So it had to come out.
Yeah. 3 weeks flash to bang is incredibly aggressive, right? Even as a strong family at that moment, you've been together through years at this point, what's kind of going through your mind as you start making those preparations? Because that's not a, hey, we got 6 months. That's a, like, let's look for a doctor and get an OR booked immediately. That's a crazy timeline.
We were definitely in the mode of crisis planning. So we weren't, trying to, plan things long term. We knew that whatever we were doing, had to be quick, to the point where if someone like pointed us towards going in that OR now, like I would have walked that way.
Yeah, it was definitely, we were really lucky that as we roped in 10th Group to help support us through this journey, a very close friend of ours was serving as the HPW commander, and he immediately looped us in with the SOCOM Care Coalition, because Dave's diagnosis, the potential outcomes were such a range. They pretty well told us like, hey, it's so intertwined in your blood vessels and pressing against your brain that inevitably you're going to have some kind of residual impact, mentally, emotionally, physically, like it's going to impact you. But it could potentially range from minor disability to you could have a stroke, through to how they described it was higher risk of death with this surgery. So once we were able to engage with the SOCOM Care Coalition, Miss Barbara took a lot of time to walk us through what the potential recovery options were for us with Dave. Hey, if you have a stroke, then the James Haley Center in Tampa is one of the best facilities to help with that. If you have, this issue with it, we can link you up with this organization. Hey, if you need to rehab PT, this is what we're going to do. And she was really the only person throughout that process who had that discussion with us of, what resources we were going to have available to us. And she was the one that was like, hey, it's not a fun conversation to have, but you guys need to talk about ensuring that all your administrative requirements are in place. Do you have passwords? Do you have documents? Do you have a will? Do you have a power of attorney? Just those gentle reminders of like, hey, I get it. Like, you're drowning. Your entire lives have changed at the drop of a hat. But like, you got to think about these things and we got to plan for them because we don't know what's next.
I actually had an interesting conversation with. So I work in the 1st Special Warfare Training Group right now here at Bragg, and I was talking to our group surgeon, and she was asking me, who is overall in charge of your care plan, deciding, what you do and why. And I told her, well, the first answer I probably have for you is Lauren. And, but behind that is probably Barbara Severino with the SOCOM Care Coalition, because, what our experience has been is that every doctor that we've run into throughout this process has been very, very good at their, pulling on their oar in the boat and, doing their job very well. But no doctor that we ran into wanted to be the one steering the boat, deciding, what to do next. And the only person managing what the long-term plan was the SOCOM Care Coalition. And we're very grateful for, someone being there, willing to raise their hand and say, I'll figure out this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a critical resource. A lot of people, I think, when they first learn about kind of the Warrior Care Program, Care Coalition, all of that, a lot of it was sprung from early GWAT, having people in the hospital that had been combat wounded, but it was immediately apparent that that was not the only need, right? We had people that were everything from your story to, a car accident, whatever it was. And like you said, there's good healthcare providers able to do their specialty, but a lot of these are multimodal and can take years. And there was a gap there 100%, where we needed people who are willing to dive in and be connectors, but also kind of leaders and shepherds throughout these processes. And so I know, if you're listening from outside and you're not familiar with the Warrior Care Program, this is taking care of our people when they're wounded, ill, and injured through advocates that are placed at every one of the major SOF hubs. And then there's some folks that do regional coordination if there's somebody that's kind of outside of that main area. And Miss Barbara was your care coalition advocate. Talk to me a little bit about your experience being able to have that resource to lean on.
It was absolutely invaluable. We've sought through our story to stress we were admittedly best case scenario that this could have happened to. We've been married for a while. We're older. We don't have kids. We're financially secure. I was able to keep my job. I have worked around this community my entire career, so I understood the language and the culture and the lingo and the acronyms. And so there was a lot of things that I could navigate myself. I took on a lot of conversations with Dave's current command, with 10th group, with his school, he was doing ILE, and I was able to reach out and be like, hey, I don't want him to lose his progress when he comes out of this. Right. And it's because of my experience, that I was able to do that. So what we sought to stress was the Care Coalition was absolutely invaluable to us with all the advantages that we had at our disposal. We still faced so many uphill challenges with administrative requirements, bureaucracy, right? Policies that are put in place that sound good on paper, but to a military spouse is entirely overwhelming when you're asking them to fill out 15 pages of paperwork to get reimbursement when they're in the middle of, trying to support their loved one through this medical emergency. And so what we've sought to, to really highlight is how instrumental the Care Coalition was for us in helping us to navigate that, because every single time some challenge came up, when we had family members around, they'd be like, Lauren, what are you going to do about that? And I'm like, I'm going to call Miss Barbara. Miss Barbara's going to fix it. And just to be able to know that somebody was there that I could call or email and say, I don't have the bandwidth to try to navigate this and figure this out. Please help me. And she would just say, I got it. Don't worry about it. And so to be able to offload that mental and emotional burden and just be able to solely focus on Dave's recovery. Because during the surgery, Dave had a stroke. And so he lost the ability to move the left side of his body. And so it was months of recovery of, exercises and moving Dave's arm and moving his leg and helping him stand and helping him learn how to hold his head up and, they stressed to us how critical it was that family member support is so important to recovery. And if I had just been standing in the hallway on the phone trying to fight with bureaucracy and administrative requirements and not being able to be there to support him, I truly don't know that his recovery would have been as successful as it was. And so even with everything that we had going for us, having the Care Coalition as a resource was truly just absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get the diagnosis, you guys are in North Carolina. I believe you end up having the surgery at Wake Forest, correct? Um, Talk to me about, again, being able to have the surgery, come out of it, and then I think you guys did the rehab elsewhere, right? And so had to move from place to place. Like all of that is logistically tough if you're not in the worst situation of your life, much less trying to do it under these circumstances. So talk me through some of those challenges as you went to Wake Forest and then moved elsewhere.
Yeah. Little tasks like, getting in and out of a car and traveling from point A to point B is difficult when you're dependent on a wheelchair in order to, get in and out of the convenience store to get a drink or something like that. But the way we ended up at Wake Forest was we initially went to First Health here in Pinehurst to the ER there. And the neurosurgeon we first talked to just happened to mention, he's like, I studied under this neurosurgeon over at Wake Forest. So, like, it'd be really cool if you guys ended up there. We're like, sounds good to us. We'll go. Yeah. Tell us how to get there.
Yeah, we want the best that you've got. And so,
Absolutely.
as we this was over a weekend on a Saturday that this happened. And so they took us via an ambulance up to Wake Forest. And so by Sunday night, we had the diagnosis, we had the plan for moving forward. And by Tuesday, the Care Coalition was involved and we were like, we need referrals because Wake Forest wanted to do baselines for everything, hearing, vision, swallowing, ear, nose, and throat, because they wanted to know what was going on right now and then what it was going to look like after the surgery. So we needed referrals for all of those specialists. And so, we're trying to get the primary care team caught up with like, hey, this is what happened. Ms. Barbara's trying to help us facilitate getting all those referrals in a timely manner, getting the referrals for the surgery. While again, we're trying to mitigate our now upside down lives to plan for all of these potential outcomes. So we landed at Wake Forest, and initially we spent the first 6 weeks of Dave's rehab at a facility in Winston-Salem. And one of the things with that is they're not used to active duty service members, and they're used to VA, which is a totally different system. And so Miss Barbara had to do a lot to help administratively, to help the facility navigate active duty requirements for what they needed to do. And it's one of the other things that we look at as one of our advantages was, had we not had a care advocate as experienced as Miss Barbara, what a struggle that would have been as well. So yes, we, once we realized that Dave had a stroke, after the first 6 weeks, Dave ended up having to have a second surgery because the fluid built up on his brain and he needed a brain shunt. And so Miss Barbara had to help us get all of the referrals to that, which meant we then had to redo all of the referrals to try to get to James Haley in Tampa because our timeline had shifted. But yeah, it was logistically, we were denied medical transportation to transfer Dave from Winston-Salem to Florida. And so in those weeks leading up to us traveling, I had to learn how to transfer him in and out of the car, to his wheelchair, to the restroom. We were going to have to break the drive up into 2 days. So how to transfer him on and off a bed in a hotel. So as we're trying to prepare to uproot our lives and move to Florida for an unknown amount of time, I'm now required to learn how to do that. And that was when I got hit with if you'd like reimbursement for patient transfer, here's 15 pages of paperwork that you have to fill out. Your hotel has to be within per diem. You need a command letter saying that he needs patient transfer. And it became one of those things for me where I was like, this isn't worth my effort and energy to get the reimbursement. And so we just ate the cost. And again, not everybody can afford that. Right. So it's one of those that, like, I get it. we have to fill out this paperwork. We want to, you know, cross our T's and dot our I's and do what we're supposed to be doing. But to a spouse who doesn't know, like, how do I find a per diem rate for a hotel?
Sure.
I don't know what that means. Right. Like that's a pretty significant ask. And some people couldn't afford to just dismiss it the way that we did. So logistically, it was really hard to get from Wake Forest to Tampa. But we were so grateful that, you know, per usual, Miss Barbara stepped in and helped us deal with all of the referrals. She arranged housing for me at the Fisher House. So as soon as we got to James Haley, I was greeted by a social worker that was assigned just to me as the family member who, you know, walked me over to the Fisher House, helped me check in while Dave was getting settled into the hospital. So yeah, logistically, it was a pretty significant undertaking to get from North Carolina down to Florida.
Absolutely. And the Fisher House, excuse me, the Fisher houses are amazing. You know, I know when my dad was sick, we stayed in the same one here in Tampa, right by the Haley VA, and just phenomenal people that run that organization, that run those houses to provide, you know, a living space free of charge for folks that are going through these issues. You know, it's an amazing resource. But if you don't know how to get tapped into it and you don't have somebody to be able to walk you into it, it can be just another thing in that logistical chain. As you came down here to the Haley VA and you started working through that long process, talk me through, you know, with the rehab and all of those things, your experience of going through, you know, as you talked about earlier, trying to start from scratch in a lot of ways of rebuilding, you know, Dave's motor function, his ability to walk, all those things. What was your experience during that time frame?
I definitely had to start from a pretty basic place where, you know, the first goals that we had really had to do with, like, I had a hard time communicating or coordinating between the left and right side of my body. So like cutting up food with a fork and knife was a challenge for me. And really anything, you know, to do with moving left hand, you know, I got kind of tired of doctors I didn't know walking into my room and asking me, go ahead and squeeze my hand with your left hand. And I'm like, you know, I can't do that. Can you wiggle your toes in your left foot for me? I'm like, you also know I can't do that.
Also no.
So getting to the point where I could do those things, and you know, that was an adjustment. You know, getting used to my workout for the day with PT. You know, might have involved just like climbing and descending stairs for, you know, a while. So I needed to get to the point where I could reestablish a lot of those very basic movement patterns required to support daily living. And, you know, I think that James A. Haley Poly Trauma Center was absolutely the right place in order to do that. I made some progress when we were in the rehab center in Winston-Salem, but that particular place was very intentionally catered to a certain population, which was mostly older people who were focused on just, you know, getting home and doing daily functions. Whereas going down to James Hilly, they understood that I was aiming a little higher than that population. And they, interestingly enough, have like a 40-foot rock wall at their facility, which they let me get on pretty much every week when I was there. So I was grateful for that opportunity. And they understood that I was aiming for different goals than the population of patients up in Winston-Salem at that rehab center.
Yeah, and the staff in Winston-Salem obviously recognized that Dave was not their typical patient, sure. And they made every effort to go get him for extra sessions, you know, give him things to do in between. Like they're like, hey, this guy's in his 30s, he's an active duty soldier. Like we're gonna invest in him and do the things. But like Dave was just saying, James Haley is certainly designed to try to help service members, you know, get back to where they were and be able to get back to their daily lives. So everything they have was just state of the art. You know, treadmills that have a harness on them that project lines onto the base of the treadmill, and you know you have to walk and step over or veer side to side. You know, just the staff there was incredible. They were able to incorporate music therapy for Dave because he plays the guitar. So being able to, you know, be able to regain that function and do something that he loves. And yes, like he mentioned, the rock wall was a very big selling point to us for going to Tampa.
Absolutely. Yeah. James A. Haley, phenomenal. I spent several weeks there myself doing the prep program and seeing everything that they had to offer and help me out a ton with some of the things that I was dealing with on a much smaller scale, obviously, but just amazing to see the level of care focused on active and veteran service members. And to your point of not just, hey, we want to get you back to just like barely functioning as an adult, but we want you to be able to achieve your goals. Dave, I'm curious, in your mind, right? At some point, there's a transition point where you're like, I'm going to continue to be a Green Beret, right? Was that from the beginning? Was that your rallying cry the minute you started trying to kind of regain function left and right? Or was that something where you got to a certain milestone and you're like, hey, actually, I think I might be able to continue to wear the uniform? Like, how did that shift in your mind?
The phrase that comes to mind for me is something that we used to say at selection is don't self-select.
Yeah.
It is, never let yourself get to a mental state where you decide that you can't cut it and you can't make it. Like make somebody else tell you that.
Yeah.
So when people ask me like, well, are you going to go back to active duty and continue serving? Like I would always tell them, well, no one's told me no yet. So I'm going to go until that happens, at least, maybe further. So whenever people would ask me like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go, back to serve? I, thought, well, that looks possible. I enjoy my job. I don't see, a strong case for anything otherwise right now. So it looks possible. It's going to be a challenge for sure, but it's not outside the realm of doable.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. I mean, that's one of the most incredible parts to me of our Warrior Care program is prior to that, a lot of the services warrior transition units for wounded, ill, and injured were really focused on like, okay, let's get this person to a reasonable level and then let's move them out of the service, right? The percentages of return to duty are far lower, unfortunately, in a lot of the services warrior transition units. And the Warrior Care program from the beginning was focused even from 5 to 6 years before it officially started, when General Brown started talking about it, was, hey, how do we, if someone wants to continue to wear the uniform, let's find a role that they can contribute and continue to serve their nation. And everything was sort of focused on that. It wasn't forced, right? Like if you had said, hey, I've had enough Army, I want to go do something else, that's fine too. But for most of us that have committed our lives to service, and especially service within special operations, that is the ultimate motivation, is to get back with the guys and gals, get back, feeling like you're contributing. So I just think it's amazing. And I think it's an incredible quote to, hey, just don't self-select, whether you're in the woods of North Carolina or whether you're in a, hospital bed at the VA in Tampa. Hey, just keep putting one foot in front of the other as best you can and make somebody else tell you no. That's phenomenal. As you're working through all of that, Lauren, how does it feel from your side as you're seeing those days and days of recovery and you're helping him get back to that spot? What was your perspective on, like, hey, continuing to serve versus, hey, we're just trying to learn left hand and right hand working together? What was going through your mind as all that's going on?
I think every day, when I reflected on the day, my ask was always give Dave the recovery that he wants to have. I know who he is as a person. He wants to climb big mountains and rock walls, much to my dismay. And he wants to run marathons, which I also don't understand. But I know he wants to live his life, and he worked so hard to get through Special Forces selection. And he chose this position in North Carolina for our family because our family lives on the East Coast, and like he wants this. And so if through this recovery that is what he continues to want, then that's what I want for him. It was hard. There's when you're in a medical environment and you're not a medical person, it's overwhelming. And so, no one explained to me that Dave had a stroke until about 6 weeks in.
Wow.
And so to me, I'm left in quiet moments just thinking he's never going to walk again, right? He's lost the function on the left side of his body. He's never going to be able to do any of these things again, because nobody explained to me how stroke recovery works either. Because if they don't tell you he had a stroke, then they don't talk to you about stroke recovery either. And so, there was a lot of quiet moments for me just wondering, like, what is his recovery going to look like? And so that's where I landed I want his recovery to be what he wants it to be, so that he can keep being the person that he wants to be through this. And if that means staying in the military, then that's awesome, because we love this life. And that would be great. But if that's not meant to be, but he's alive and with us, then so be it. That's okay too.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's tough to have to keep it all together as the supporter and caregiver, because that that person who's dealing with it is looking at you constantly as well, and their perception of how you feel about it is a rallying cry for them as well. And so keeping that strength is incredible on both your parts, right? Throughout, to be able to, Dave, for you to keep on driving on, and Lauren, for you to keep on driving on and making him drive on is pretty incredible. I'm curious, through your journey, did you intersect with other families that were going through similar hardship, wounds, illness, injury? Did you run into some that had a similar experience where they had advocates, and did you run into some that didn't? And did you see any of those kind of challenges from others going through similar?
That is one benefit of Fisher House living that we didn't really expect or think we would run into. But some of the personalities that Lauren ran into living at the Fisher House were pretty astounding, and definitely different from our own, whether it be like a 18-year-old kid getting in a Humvee rollover and then ending up at James Haley, and his parents in the Fisher House with Lauren, and probably many more that you can describe better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in the Fisher House was there for a different reason, but all of us were there because our lives had drastically changed in a moment. And so all of us are, and this is where the active duty versus veteran thing came in too, was, we would kind of get together in the evenings because everybody's in the kitchen and making themselves dinner. And, occasionally throughout the week, the Fisher House serves dinner. So everybody's down. And so everybody's talking about the challenges that they're facing, right? Whether it's administrative, whether they're trying to get follow-on care for their loved ones and they're struggling. And so everyone's trying to share resources. And I was the lone, like, active duty service member spouse. And so I'm like, I can't utilize any of those things, right? Because we're active duty. But we were lucky because we did have a care advocate, and we were the only ones that I talked to who had a care advocate. And we've talked to friends, throughout this journey as we've returned home and began to share our story to kind of highlight, advocacy for military caregivers and military healthcare fixes and upgrades to some of the challenges that we faced, who told us, like, hey, my service member got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it took me 6 months to get a referral to get a specialist because no one told me about the Care Coalition, and that they could help me. And so I literally had to make it my full-time job to try to get my service member, who was still trying to serve and still trying to do their job, the care that they needed and the specialist that they needed for their diagnosis and for their treatment. So, through this journey, and through telling our story, we've met, other families who it was a spouse caregiver who was trying to advocate for her child, and the differences in her journey from ours and the things that she experienced. We've recently heard a story of a veteran that we hadn't seen in about 10 years from a previous life, and just happened to run into them again. And they're dealing with a major medical issue, and no one told them, like, hey, as a veteran, yes, you do also still have access to the Care Coalition. And so we were able to put them in contact with Miss Barbara, because I was like, I know she'll fix it. You'll be in good hands. You'll be in good hands with Miss Barbara. So, through it, that's been one of the positive experiences of this journey, is that as we've shared our story, we've been able to hear other stories of, yes, I had a care advocate. No, I didn't have a care advocate. Here's the challenges I faced. Here's the resources I had. And we've just been able to continuously grow that outreach as others, walk their own medical journeys.
Yeah, it's incredible. One of the things that I didn't really realize when I was in group that I realized when I moved to the SOCOM headquarters and was helping run POTIF, kind of the sister service for Warrior Care, is really my advice to, if you're active duty and you're listening to this and you have any sort of like an injury, anything, even if you don't think you need really any kind of specialized care, get enrolled with the Warrior Care program so they at least have a file on you. You've got an advocate, all those things, because then when you have something like this that comes out of the blue, you already have someone to call, right? Even if you're just sort of at the lowest level of involvement with the Warrior Care program, but they know who you are, they know they're tracking a little bit of your story, who your spouse is, all those things, it can speed that up. Another kind of critical role that Warrior Care fills is they can be the go between, kind of the liaison between the service member and the nonprofit space. So if you're active duty and you do need some assistance from nonprofit, they can do the legal thing so that you don't have to eat the cost on moving things, or if there's a therapy device or things like that. So it is a, you can always reach out to nonprofits directly, but if you're active duty, if you receive anything over than $25, you can potentially get in trouble for it, even though everyone on both sides is well-meaning. The Care Coalition War Care program can do that legal paperwork, get the right signatures to make sure that you're fully covered, whether you need whatever it is. I'm curious, did you guys have any involvement with nonprofits stepping in and helping? Was that part of your story as well?
We absolutely did. So when we got down to James Haley, we found ourselves under the care of Rico, which is a retired Green Beret working for the Care Coalition down at James Haley. And he was our version of Barbara down there. And he did exactly that, of interfacing with, in our case, it was the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. Mm-hmm. And one day he walked into my hospital room with, knowing that we had faced some Airbnb and lodging costs when we were up in Winston-Salem and other places. So he came in with a check from a sizable reimbursement check from them for our program, and a brand new iPad, oddly.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
They were very good to us, and they absolutely did interface with the SOCOM Care Coalition. That was our connection to those benevolent organizations that had a very drastic and appreciated impact on our experience down there.
No, that's awesome. Well, currently you're still in uniform. You're still doing the job. You're on the other side of it. I'm sure there's still continuing challenges, but you've achieved that goal of being able to continue to serve. How's that experience been, getting back into SWCC and continuing to work as a Green Beret? What's been your experience since?
It's been so. Right now, I am the S3 for the support battalion for Special Warfare Training Group, and one thing I was talking to Lauren about is, on the heels of this kind of experience, it's not all that unplausible to think that, okay, this guy's been kind of out of the fight for a while. We just need to find somewhere to administratively hide him for a certain period of time. until, such point that he can be useful to the organization again. So it was nice that it's been challenging, but it's been gratifying that the people that I was assigned to and worked with identified pretty substantial and challenging job for me to go right from that experience right into going and being an S3 for the support battalion for SWIC, which is a very complex and challenging organization to get a handle of, exactly what they all do. So there's a lot of different things going on at the same time there. So I've been enjoying having, going right into a challenge for sure, and something that I feel is very much worthy of my time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, S3 operations role is something that would have been on the career path anyway, right? Like that's not like, hey, we're just gonna, to your point, we're gonna stick him over here. Like S3 ops is a very legit role that is not a hey, you're checking in for a couple hours and rolling out. That's a very busy job. And to your point, at Special Warfare Training Group, there's so many different things going on in so many different places. I'm sure it's challenging. I've even heard that you're continuing to challenge yourself physically with some goals, kind of as you continue to wear the uniform. Like, what's next? What are you pushing towards right now?
So next is probably passing an AFT, as I have regained a lot of the daily functions and things that we're talking about, and kind of the next big challenge for me is regaining an acceptable level of athletic performance, which is a component of
Sure.
still doing this job, and that's something that I continue to work towards, knowing that I'll have to get to the point where I can pass and do well enough on a AFT at some point in time. So that's kind of the next challenge in line. And there are others too, as from our time in Colorado. I used to joke that everyone who moves to Colorado takes up, for some duration of time, some Rocky Mountain adventure sport, whether it's skiing or mountain biking or otherwise. So after trying out a few of them myself and breaking a bone or two, I decided that I prefer my danger at slow speeds. So I stuck with rock climbing as a preferred hobby. So, when we learned of my diagnosis and what the recovery would likely look like, I called an old rock climbing buddy of mine in Colorado and said, Brett, like, if I survive this, we need to go do something, big and impressive. And he said, well, biggest thing in North America is the nose, which is a route up El Capitan. So that is kind of the passing an AFT is the next goal, but
Sure.
Climbing the nose is probably a little further in the future. But it's something that I don't think Brett and I are going to abandon. I think we're going to continue to pursue learning how to climb big walls and do multi-day climbs.
Yeah, spoken like a true special operator. It's never enough just to go from not walking to walking, right, Lauren? That's you gotta try to climb the. That's it's a double-edged sword. The ambition that we have to push ourselves, it keeps us going. But also, I'm sure from your side, you're like, oh wow, that's that would be dangerous without anything. But it's an incredible story to go from not being able to walk, not being, learning how to hold your head up, to now running, now pulling, now doing all these things, and rock climbing. I mean, my first ODA was a mountain team, and I had enough trouble trying to get my right hand and left foot to do the right things when I wasn't recovering from this type of thing. So that's incredible. It's amazing that you've been able to take that experience in the Haley VA of being able to get on that rock wall and say, hey, this is something that I can do, that I can continue to progress at, that's challenging enough to where I can continue to push myself, but is not so daunting that I just know it's not possible. Right. That's incredible. Lauren, what are your thoughts as you see him now continue to serve, and you are now an advocate for others to get engaged in the Care Coalition and all of these things.
It's amazing. We have moments periodically where we'll be, driving down the road and Dave will be like, do you know how nice it is to like not have to wait in the car for you to get the wheelchair and to transfer me to the wheelchair? Like I can literally just get out of the car on my own and walk, and like, I hope as we, progress further from this journey, that's not a perspective that we forget.
Yeah.
How this whole experience turned our lives completely upside down. And I've said, I don't think we'll ever look back on it and say we're grateful this happened to us.
Sure.
Because no, 0 out of 10 would recommend to my friends. But through this journey, we've been able to take our story and share it in a way that does help with advocacy efforts in highlighting, here were some of the challenges that we faced. So yeah, that policy that you made that sounds good on paper, like to a young military spouse who has no idea, like can't even tell you what organization her service member serves in, like that's entirely overwhelming. Asking for help is hard as it is. And when the Army or, whatever military branch that you're in just shows up and forced to help you and you're not familiar with it, it's intimidating and it's scary. And they're talking at you in acronyms and they're asking phrases and saying things. And you're like, I don't understand. I don't understand what you're saying. And that's scary and intimidating. And so being able to bring voice to that as, somebody who was familiar to it and be able to speak to it in a way that's like, hey, from the spouse perspective, guys, this is hard. This is hard. And so just being able to, to share our story in a way that becomes an advocacy effort and something that we can keep championing as we continue. We've been home now. Dave came home in November. And it's something, we've continued to face challenges.
Sure.
It's, I literally just talked to Miss Barbara on Monday, about, some administrative things that we're struggling with. And so, she's still just a steadfast, constant presence, even now that we've transitioned to, our new normal. Like this is our lives now. So yeah, it's been a journey. But we're grateful for the takeaways that we got from it and what we've been able to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible story and incredible for you guys to continue to go out and share it so that others understand some of these intricacies, both the good and the bad, right? Some of the good that came from the Warrior Care program, but also some of the bad that if you weren't as familiar as you are and they wouldn't have wrapped their arms around you, could have been much worse and is much worse for others who don't have it. I know there was a special moment where you guys were able to meet some of the other folks at the Warrior Care program and kind of see this infrastructure behind. Talk me through that a little bit.
It was a cool experience. So, through all of this, Miss Barbara was there, but she was the voice on the other end of the line for me. And so when we got home in November, and in January, we were able to go over to the Care Coalition building on Fort Bragg and meet Miss Barbara in person.
Yeah.
And I think what was so cool about that experience and so powerful was as we were walking through the building, she would introduce us to other care advocates and she would say, these are the cars. And they all knew who we were. And so even though Miss Barbara was the face and the voice, and she was, the presence for us and the cheerleader and the advocate, everyone played a part in helping us get through what we went through. And they all supported her. They supported us. So they were all very familiar with our journey. And so, as we're walking around the office, she'd be like, oh, these are the cars. And, one of the advocates was like, y'all been through a lot, and that was so powerful because then we got to see like, not only is our care advocate amazing, but this whole team truly just embodies what it means to take care of people, not just external for the people that they're supporting, but internally as a cohesive team. They're, helping each other out to navigate like, hey, I learned this lesson, like help me out with this, teach me how you did this. So that was such a really cool thing to experience walking into that building.
Yeah, I love to hear it, because one of the things that we've constantly talked about as the evolution of the Warrior Care program continue to grow, and we continue to be able to put more advocates in more places and build more infrastructure, is always trying to focus on each and every person is, it's a person, it's a family, it's not a number. And I think a lot of times in the bigger, broader healthcare arena, and even in some of the services arena, people can become a number because you just have so many cases and spread so many different places. But that care and ability to know the family, the story, what's really needed, and be intricately involved throughout the, intimately involved throughout the process, and not just, oh yeah, hey, we helped them once, 18 months ago or whatever. Like, to continue to walk alongside is very, very amazing to hear, for sure.
The conversation that comes to mind is my brother came down to James Haley and visited for a while, and he spent a couple years as an enlisted infantryman at the Old Guard and also at the 101st. And his comment is, after explaining some of our interactions and some of the advocacy work that was being done on our behalf, is he commented, he's like, it's obvious to me, Dave, that you don't exist within the Army that I knew. Because if what happened to you happened to someone that I knew in the Army that I know, like, you'd be out of the Army. And, he brought that up, saying it was very apparent that some people in some influential places like care about you, and it's obvious from the way that you're being treated that the organizations that you interact with, like, treat you differently from the way that he had experienced in the Army and different organizations. So I think that says, a lot about how we approach the value of humans in our organization.
Yeah. And it was, the way the special operations community rallied around us, alumni or, active duty. We, with Dave being at NDU, we needed letters from his commander for things. Well, NDU command is at Fort Jackson, right? And so it was like, who is Dave's commander? And so shout out to the Fort Bragg commander that gave me a blanket letter and signed his name to it and was like, use my name in vain. I don't care. If anyone asks, you send them here. Like, I don't care what you need. It was just a blanket. Whatever she asked you for, you give it to her.
There was a weird administrative battle when I came to the NDU program of, where do NDU students sit administratively?
Yeah.
And the solution was that, all our orders said that we belonged to HHC SWIC, but HHC SWIC didn't want to take on, that many students at one time unnecessarily. So student company at Fort Jackson raised their hand and said they want to take us on. I think that's whose books I was originally on. But when I came to Fort Bragg, I had a marketplace matchup for assignment at Kent McCall after the NDU program, where I was going to go be the next SUT commander out there. So, in us trying to figure out administratively, like, how do we get a command letter and who wants to actually own this, broken healing Green Beret, like, 1st Battalion, for Special Warfare Training Group raised their hands, like, he was heading to us, we'll own him.
We'll take him.
So they expressed, ownership of me, and were very gracious in, giving me the time and space that I needed to be able to recover to the point that I could go join another part of the SWIC organization when I got back.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, I think as you get older and more experienced in the community, you appreciate that safety net a little bit more. But as a young guy on a team, you're like, oh yeah, if I get shot, they'll take care of me or whatever. But really, the wrapping around safety net of, it doesn't matter if it's something with your family, it doesn't matter if it's something with you, it doesn't matter if it's, from a combat wound or from just a crazy medical diagnosis or an accident. Like, we are going to take care of our people, period. Like, we're going to figure out a way to get to yes and take care of them. And we continue to rally around that, from the lowest levels all the way to the top, and pushing that up to Congress and everything else for all these funding things. It is not a like, hey, we just might need this. Like, this is happening all day, every day across the enterprise. And it's not a bumper sticker, right? Soft truth number one's not a bumper sticker. It's a every single day figuring out how to take care of people. But I hope that those that are listening, I hope it resonates with them as well, whether, especially if you're a family member, to understand that, hey, if my family member is part of the special operations community, there are resources available that all they want to do is help, right? You have advocates in the Warrior Care Program. You've got folks at Preservation of the Force and Family. You've got a ton of us in the nonprofit space that want to help and can get involved, but also up and down the chain of command within the active duty footprint. They'll figure out a way to get you somewhere to where you can get that letter, or you can get a billet, you can do something so that you get taken care of. As we wrap up, I want to give you each, kind of a final thought, final word as you think about this story. And it's just an amazing testament to both of your resolve, and to you both as people and as a couple, to have this diagnosis that is hey, we better walk to the OR right now, to now sitting back at Fort Bragg as an S3 and as a family. It's just incredible. And so I want to turn it over to you all for any parting words.
The story that comes to mind for me is, our conversation is kind of jumping around to how different organizations in the Army, treat and value humans. And what comes to mind is, I recall when I commissioned as an infantry officer and I was getting ready to head out to Hawaii for my first assignment, I was very confident that all the biggest challenges I was going to face in my lieutenancy all had to do with leading troops in combat. And I was convinced that all my biggest challenges were going to be tactical in nature. And I was prepared for that challenge. And what I found, with my time in Hawaii was very different. That all the biggest and most compelling challenges that I faced during that time were all social, psychological. It was a massive challenge leading this group of angry teenagers very far away from home and asked to do hard things on a regular basis and keep them focused and motivated and emotionally stable. And those challenges, were very human, and were a reminder that, as much as the Army can appear like a big unfeeling system, it's full of humans which need regard and care and need all kinds of emotional and personal support in order to function. And being the one to provide that care in that direction is a really compelling thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I think my charge to this community would be, to those who are in a position of authority, who are decision makers, or who find themselves in a position as a leadership team and supporting a family member who's walking a journey, whether it's like ours or a different medical situation, if it's the service member, if it's their spouse, if it's their children. Listen to their stories, listen to the challenges that they are facing, and be an advocate for changing it, right? Like it's amazing that the Care Coalition exists to help us navigate it, but I want to see us get to a point to where it's like, hey, let's fix that, right? Let's stop making it a challenge and let's just fix it. So then it's not an issue anymore that the Care Coalition has to get involved and help this family member. Like, let's just fix it. Let's streamline it. Let's overcome these administrative challenges. So as you're seeing family members and service members struggle with these things, just take on that extra step of, hey, let's make it a little better so that the people who walk this after them don't have to deal with the same challenges that they faced.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing your story, for joining us on SOFcast today. I want to echo Miss Barbara in that these are the Carrs, and we're so blessed and lucky to have them in the special operations community. I'm so thankful that you guys are continuing to serve and that you're willing to continue to tell your story. And I'm incredibly thankful for you guys for joining us on SOFcast. Thanks for the time today. Thanks for your continued service, your continued advocacy. On behalf of all of us, from General Fenton on down at USSOCOM, thanks for joining us today on SOFcast. And for all of you out there listening, thanks for joining us for another episode of SOFcast. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of SOFcast. No matter where you find our show, do us a favor, go give us a like, a follow, and share it with somebody in your network who might enjoy this episode. Also, please go give us a 5-star review. It really does help other people find the show. If there's someone else that you'd like to hear from or a topic you'd like to hear about, please shoot us an email, sofcast@socom.mil. And while you're at it, go check us out on social media at USSOCOM, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, wherever. Follow along with what's going on with U.S. Special Operations Command and with the show. And on behalf of all of us from General Fenton on down at U.S. Special Operations Command, thanks for listening to another episode of SOFcast.